blame some of the people probably in the committee over there when it kicked out. But we are going to be talking a little bit about Bath and where they're hoping to be going to, but also, given that this is the restart weekend, we're going to be talking to Will Hurrell later on. Restart, of course, the players' charity, focusing very much at the moment on mental health. He's a player who's had to step aside from the game because of injuries. That will have hit him hard. We're going to speak to him later on the impacts on that, and we're going to be also picking up on the tweets that you can send us, #GP tonight. Ugo Money and Ben Kay still here. I don't for one moment expect you to remember Bath's heyday back in the 80s and the 90s. That's very much my era when you came here, and if you came away with just 40 points scored against you, you were doing pretty well. But Ugo, there is a weight of expectation on Bath, probably which I would guess only Leicester Tigers could sort of empathise with. They slipped up today against Wasps. How much might that be playing on the players as each season starts? Could this be Bath's year?
Yeah, I think they've always had this pressure, regardless of the fact they haven't won a trophy for quite a number of years now. But they're a rugby town. They're a fully rugby town that are woven into the fabric of English rugby history. For the guys individually, you look at the quality of players that they have. They want success for themselves, but by the way, in doing that, they've got to come together as a team. And as much as they'll look back at their history, look at their DNA, they'll certainly want to create their own identity. And we've seen that since rugby's restarted. Today has not been a good day for them, but they're certainly going in the right direction.
But they got through to the Premiership final back in 2015, beaten by Saracens. They had to throw the book at Saracens any way they could. They had to run and run hard. That's the only way they could play. If we look at their record since then, it's not been brilliant. We've been waiting for them to come alight. But potentially the secret for them now, is it their coaching team? Have they now got the coaching team they need?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, but it's about what they build, and we spoke beforehand about building an identity of the sort of team you want, so that all your recruitments feed into that, and you're not just buying the next guy that everyone's talking about. You're going, well, he will fit how we want to play. You knew how Bath would play in their heyday. They had, as a result, because of the players that stayed, they became synonymous with the team. The likes of Andy Robinson, Victor Abugo, all those sort of players became big cult heroes down here, and Wasps need to get back to that by playing to the style of rugby that's going to suit their players and getting them to stay and be a part of it. And they've always had decent players here, the likes of Grewcock, Borthwick, David Flatman, all synonymous with things, but they didn't quite reach that level of success. So I think they've got the coaching staff in place now. They now need to build on these foundations. Today was a bit of an anomaly. Things changed. We went away from their style of rugby, and the uncontested scrums didn't help them, but they can't throw all that out now. They're building something, and they're certainly going the right direction.
Both of you guys have been part of championship winning sides. Ugo, what was the one thing that stood out for you in a Harlequins' big year?
I felt as if everyone had a good team. Everyone does have quality players, but I just didn't think anyone could actually rival our culture, our camaraderie, our togetherness. And you're seeing that at Bath, you're seeing that at Wasp, and I think that's probably the one thing which really matters, and there's a huge amount of value on it, because in terms of the analysis, strength and conditioning, everyone's on a fairly level playing field, strength and depth. But when you're putting a 15 into any final, and we look at the top 4, the top 6, any of those teams could be anyone on any given day. But the thing which is the foundation of any quality side is the culture, and we use that word a little bit too willy-nilly, but for me that's the thing which gets you through tough times. It's the thing which propels you above every other side in the Premiership, and for me in 2012 that's the one thing I felt was our trump card over every other side.
I bet you can't talk about Bath's future without talking about their stadium. I mean, of all the grounds, this is the one which has changed the least. It's pretty similar to the one that I used to run out in front of. How much of an impact might it be if Bath got the stadium the players feel they need?
Look, it's all location, isn't it? They've got the best location probably of any team in the Premiership, but they haven't been able to match that with the actual bricks and mortar because of the restrictions on planning here and the fact that this is a recreation ground used for other things in the summer. So that looks like it might be turning now. We might see a stadium that matches their training facility, which is the poshest training facility in the Premiership. And then, that's the sort of thing that can add to your team's the most important thing, but then just all those little bits to the side start building a momentum, and when the performances start to match the stadium that they're hoping to build, suddenly there'll be a tough place and a place that people will want to come and play as well.
If you've got a 3-bed apartment in Bath that you want to sell, Ben is clearly your man. He's got all the facts of location. Guys, let's have a look at the games we've seen through this round 17 of the Gallagher Premiership. Hugo, the result of the weekend, potentially what we've just seen?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. It's been the only competitive game of the weekend, and it's been really trying times, I guess, for strength conditioning coaches, for players having to midweek game backing up with the weekend, and that kind of disparity in terms of the quality in some of the teams. Teams have been blown away, but today we got two proper teams, a really good competition, and for all their struggles with their injuries and the poor way they started that early 10 minutes to bounce back and to come away with a away victory is absolutely outstanding.
And Ben, for you, which game really caught your eye?
I think just the difference in how we're having to see this season, the Gloucester-Leicester one, because it was so clear that Gloucester were going to batter Leicester in the first half, but then we're all forgetting that teams are having to put all their superstars on the bench when they rest their starting team, and so Gloucester took all their stars off, Leicester brought all theirs back on and nearly got back into the game. So I think that strategy is going to change a bit, and certainly that when the coaches make their substitutions will become really, really important to the make-up of this season.
Well, let's go to some of the tweets, and Mike Cannon 999, emergency services maybe. To be honest, he says, I'm enjoying the fact that sides are having to utilise their full squads. Long may it continue. We are going to be discussing something around that in a little while. From Danny Cipriani, well, this was fun. We like to keep our fans watching to the last minute. They certainly kept the Gloucester fans on their toes in that win over Leicester Tigers. And this from Stefan Anderson Thomas, double-barreled name, had to be a rugby supporter. Wayne Barnes dealt with that very well. We're talking about the front row player going down injured. But credit certainly needs to be given to Tom West for saying he isn't happy to safely scrum at hooker. He could have said yes, then not knowing what he was doing, and caused a serious injury to him or others. Let's have a look at the clip. This is what happened. Listen closely to what referee Wayne Barnes is saying.
So, front row on.
I love that. You see Tom West thinking, I hope I got that right. I hope I said the right thing.
When Wayne first went up to him, he went, yeah, I'll give it a go. And Wayne said, no, you won't give it a go. Can you do it or not? But the brilliant thing is about that, out of shot, you could see him talking somewhere. I bet it was the second rows going, we don't want any scrums. We want to rest, so we can run around. Just make sure you say no, and then I've played in a game with uncontested scrums. You've got, as a front five forward, you've got so much more energy than you usually have. I'm sure he hasn't played there for 3 years, and it's probably not. It probably is the right thing to do. But it would have been interesting if Wayne Barnes had gone and said, as is sometimes the case with non-head injuries, you'll have to lose a player. Whether he would have felt pressurised into playing there, so that they could keep the full complement on the field.
But Wayne Barnes is fairly well versed in this, unfortunately for him. You remember that 100-minute match with Slimani, Wales against France it would have been, and just the way in which he dealt with it, just taking his time, making sure that health and safety is absolute paramount. For me, that's why Wayne is the best ref in the world. We've had 2 brilliant games which he's been involved in. Exeter Bristol, when he allowed that game to flow, and today, which could have been really difficult with that situation, dealt with it perfectly, and we got another really good game out of it.
It was great though. At one point he said, oh, hang on, I think I've got a little bit of that wrong. You can see his brain whirring through. I mean, crikey, the regulations on who comes off, who goes on in a situation like that is astonishing. Guys, for you, have you ever been asked on a rugby field to do something you're not entirely comfortable with position-wise? That's just such the wrong question to ask Ben Kay. I'm going to focus on you, Hugo. about have you been asked to? You've never been asked to scrum down in the front row?
No.
Are you even aware of where the front row is?
No, not at all. No. I've had to pack down a blindside when we've gone down to 14 men and we've had to put in our own ball.
Tell me you were better than Johnny May.
I mean, yeah, I knew exactly where to bound, but I was just as ineffective as Johnny May. It was uncomfortable. A huge amount of credit to those guys that do it, but for me, I want to stay as far away from the scrum as possible.
But I'm not going to ask you that question. But what I am going to pick up on is the energy bank for the player, for the second row, for the prop, who doesn't have to scrummage all the time. I love the fact that when the scrum's engaged, you can still hear the second rows doing their count and their shout, even though they weren't pushing. But it mentioned about who it favoured most. How much energy is sapped out of your legs, scrummaging.
It's a massive amount, because it's not even just, you're not just pushing, you're stationary, so it's the same part of the muscle that's working. It has a huge effect on these sort of energy systems. The worst thing, you can do all the fitness work pre-season, but your first scrummage session or mauling session of the pre-season, and you know about it, you can be as fit as you want. But I think today we didn't really get to see the benefit for both sides, really. They didn't get that energy around the field as a result, probably because of the competition at the breakdown. But I think it did favour Wasps slightly more. And what surprised me, we've talked about sort of the energy in the scrummaging, not having the hooker that could throw in. Where Bath really let themselves down was not forcing Wasps to throw into more lineouts, because that could have really scuppered their whole performance.
That was what was so impressive about that try at the end, that they went for the lineout. It was a wobbly old throw in, but they got there in the end. Let's go back to one of the tweets. This was from Mike Cannon, and he was saying he's enjoying the fact that the sides are having to utilise their full squads. This leads us into an article that you wrote, Ugo, where you're saying, do you know what, I'm not averse to the midweek games. I think there is a place for them in the modern game. What do you mean by that? Where do you see them coming into their own?
Yeah, for clarity on it, I'm not saying that I want to see a game on a Wednesday backed up with a Saturday. I just think there's certainly windows within the current structure of our season where we can actually not fight against the international games. We know that it's too difficult. The Premiership fighting against England, playing against Scotland at home, it doesn't work. We don't get the viewing numbers. We don't get full stadiums. So I just think we just need to be a little bit more just creative in around when we can get the best out of our domestic game. And for me, I think the midweek matches work really well. It gives a huge amount of opportunity just to potentially see new faces in the crowd, perhaps a younger generation of guys coming in. There are hundreds of thousands of amateur players that play every single Saturday. They don't get to see Premiership rugby at 3 o'clock on a Saturday or on a Sunday. They may get that opportunity midweek. We can see more schools, universities, families. I just think at times that rugby have just been perhaps too stubborn, and we've got to understand that we haven't grown as quickly as we want to. Brett Gosper said that last week. So why not look at these opportunities? I'm not saying it's the absolute answer, but have a look at it. A new approach to develop and invite a brand new audience into our game.
This little virus, which is causing people problems, is making rugby look at itself, making so many aspects of life and business look at itself. What can we do better? How can we evolve? Do you think this is an opportunity, Ben?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because what I do like about the midweek games is it keeps people in touch with the sport all the way through. It's a bit like a big tournament, a World Cup, or where you have that constant, or what's the next game, what's happening in a couple of days. I think we have to be careful that we don't alienate the fan base that pay the wages and put the bums on the seats to come and watch their team. And we know that some teams struggle on a Friday night to fill their stadium because of the travel restrictions and everything else. Some fans really like a Saturday at 3 p.m. They don't like going anywhere else from there. But I do agree with Ugo, the international window is perhaps somewhere where you could look at it, because everyone wants to watch England when they're playing on a Saturday, or whichever country you follow, and you probably want to follow your team as well. So that is an opportunity, I think, maybe to look at.
I'm talking about 4 or 5 games in the season. American sports are so good at theming Friday night games and just making it feel a bit different. If you could drop the ticket price in and just make it a bit more amenable to people just to come in and just have a totally different feel about what it is. But I just think rugby just needs to adopt and actually not be so closed off, but actually just accept that we aren't where we want to be, but in order to get to where we want to be, just looking at things slightly different, that's all.
Well, the NFL, they don't have to deal with the French, so that's why it's easier for them. Standby letters from France. Let's have a look, though, at the point that has been made about seeing so many younger players given their opportunity. Maybe not Exeter, Ugo, because we're seeing Exeter. I think it might have been you in Coventry say they've got the 2 best teams, Exeter first team, Exeter second 15. But the opportunity now, finally, to have meaningful competitions for younger players in the squads, that's important.
It's absolutely brilliant, and it's just accelerated these younger players to get on the conveyor belt of talent. We're only 3 years away away from a World Cup, and I think Eddie Jones and his England coaching staff will probably have two different ways of looking at it. He'll have a team just to get through the Six Nations, next Six Nations, but what he does beyond the British and Irish Lions tour, if it takes place next summer, it's going to be really interesting. We saw it in the build-up to Japan 2019. He went with your likes of your Hartleys, your Browns, your Robshaws, your Haskells, but post that 18 months out to a World Cup, he started bleeding in these young, talented players. Your McConaughey's, your Currys started being mainstays. He's getting to have a look at them now, but it's so important that these younger players get regular rugby. It will be challenging of their decision making, the way in which they recover, their professional attitude to it, but it's brilliant to see the Gallagher Premiership flooded with opportunities for young players.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, the number of players who come out through in the last few years. When we go back seasons before that, the cupboard seemed to be so bare in so many positions. That one we will discuss again as we build up to matches in round 18, round 19, as we find out how the season is going to come to an end and how the teams are going to juggle their resources. But this has been the Restart Rugby Weekend, the Rugby Players Charity, looking after the welfare of rugby. We're going to be talking to Will Hurrell, the former Bristol Bears centre, who's sadly had to retire from rugby because of a terrible head injury led to him having a stroke. We're going to be chatting to him later to find out how that has impacted. We'll talk to him in just a few moments after this break. Welcome back to Gallagher Premiership tonight. We are, of course, in Bath, where, well, it's just a thrilling game as Wasps came back from behind and with injuries hampering their progress to win over Bath. This is what's coming up in the build-up to round 18. We've got rugby tonight on tour at 8 o'clock on Wednesday. Craig and Ben will be looking back at the weekend and forward to next season's new look European structure. Simon Halliday, chairman of the EPCR, will be helping them out with that. And those are the three main games that you can see on BT Sport. Northampton against Exeter from Franklin's Gardens on Friday night. Join us from 7 o'clock. And then two games for you on Saturday. Gloucester against London Irish. That's an important one, of course, at 4:15. But the significance of Harlequins against Bath at 1:30. 3,000 fans are going to be allowed into the Stoop, as is a test event to see whether fans can finally start coming in. A reminder, of course, that you can watch all of the games over BT Sport's various platforms. Now, and as we know, round 17 of the Gallagher Premiership has been dedicated to Restart, which is the Rugby Players Association's players' arm. There's been a particular focus this time round on the confidential counselling programme, looking at players' mental health. One player who has sadly had to retire from the game is Will Hurrell because of injuries. The former Bristol Bear is now a retired player, and Restart is very much there to support these players as they find it difficult, or maybe not, to adjust to life after playing rugby. Let's put those questions to the man himself. Will Hurrell joins us. Will, thank you so much. Can you hear us? We can see you. Hopefully you can hear us.
Yeah, mate, I can hear you all good.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. Just let us all know, people who have no idea what happened to you, what happened and why you now have had to step aside from rugby.
So it was a game against Leicester up at their place. Obviously wanted to make a big impact. Used to play for Leicester a long time ago, and it's nice going back there and playing. And tried to put a big hit in on the second row, and I just got my head caught the wrong side. I'm a big abrasive boy, and I'm always trying to tackle above my weight. So just got my head caught the wrong side and took a bad hit. Thought I was all right to shake it off. I deteriorated through the game, and I came off and I just couldn't speak. I was sat there. I was pouring with sweat. I couldn't get out what I was trying to say, and I couldn't stand up properly. And then I got rushed to A&E, to hospital. And I had a CT scan, stayed in the night, and they said I was fine. But then, unfortunately, a couple of weeks later, I had an MRI scan, and they told me I'd had a brain bleed. And then a further MRI told me I'd had a stroke. And I went to see a specialist who dealt with boxers and loads of high-profile head injury cases, and he said, "Look, mate, if you get another hit like that, you're dust, basically." He said, "You know, you're likely to be in a wheelchair. If not, you could die." So the way I play, I just said, you know, I just can't risk that. You know, I got a child, I got my family, and you know, other things to think about, and a lot of stuff ahead of me. So I had to call it a day, which has been the hardest. Is the only decision, but it was the hardest one to make in my life. You know, and it's been really tough, actually.
What have you found the most tough thing, the most difficult thing to adjust to?
I mean, it's being around the lads. There's nothing like a rugby environment. You know, the friendships you build last a lifetime. And I just love rugby. Honestly, if I could play till I was 70, I would have. But watching the games, when the games started back again, I was all right until then. And I watched the first set of games after lockdown, and it was tough. It was really tough. Probably one of the toughest weekends of my life watching them, actually.
People watching rugby, whether they're watching an international, watching club rugby, and watching junior rugby, will see big, hefty guys like you piling into tackles and taking their time to get back to their feet. This is a reminder that sometimes people don't bounce back quite so easily, quite as easily as maybe the public would expect. What's your message to people who are thinking, I've got a little bump, I should be okay?
I think you've got to listen to the professionals, but listen to your body as well. I carried on, and I kind of started feeling, you know, I'm not right, and the way I play, I think I'm invincible. I always did. I thought, you know, I can run through anyone, I can tackle anyone, but unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And you know, you're not invincible. And all I'd say to people is just be careful with your body. You only get one of them, and love rugby and just enjoy it, because you know it doesn't last forever, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it does. I mean, it's really sad to hear your story, to hear your tale in the way in which you've had to retire. We talk about this rugby family, and they're at their best when players are struggling and going through adversity. Can you talk us what the rugby family's been like to you and how Restart have helped you?
Mate, it's been awesome. It really has. You know, I've had thousands of messages. That many, I can't even get through to reply to all of them. Offering support. People that have had similar brain injuries, which has made me feel lucky that, you know, I'm just struggling with memory, and I'm a bit slower than I was before. You know, when I hear about people that are, you know, paralysed from it, got anger issues from it, like loads of stuff, they get frustrated, and I feel really lucky that this is all I've got, is a bad memory and a bit slow, and my language is a bit off sometimes. But Restart they have helped me, not even before this head injury. You know, the RPA, I've got a lot to say about. They are fantastic, mate, and the support they've put in place. You know, they were with head injury. You know, when I've been through some really tough times, and they've been there for me every step of the way. And without them, I'd have been in a much worse position.
What about the future? What does the future hold for you? Where are you going to channel your energies now?
Well, I've been playing a lot of golf, but unfortunately I don't think I'm going to make a golf pro when I keep slicing it into the out of bounds. But for me, at the moment, I've had quite a few offers. I've been dead lucky, and you know, there's some coaching roles out there that I'm, you know, quite keen on. But also there's a few business opportunities come up, which you know, really exciting, and you know, something new for me to try. And I need that focus, like rugby. I'm going to need something like that in my life. And for me, coaching, trying to pass on what I can, especially to younger players, and you know, how I sort of built myself up. That's what I see myself doing, and then, you know, diving into whatever comes along, whatever business opportunities comes along, and just going into it full goo.
Full goo, that is the mentality. I have no idea what that means, but you should do it. You should absolutely do it. Will, thank you so much. We wish you and your family all the very, very best. And remember, it is absolutely acceptable to lob your driver 250 yards down the fairway when you do slice it into the rough. So do that. We wish you all the best. We'll catch up with you through the season. Thanks ever so much indeed. Thanks, Will. Wonderful to hear from Wirral, and Ben, to hear the support that the RPA and Restart are
really,
giving
but
him.
I always put it similar to retiring and being forced to retire to actually mourning, and you're mourning your own identity, because that's what you've always been. He's talked about his friends not being around quite as much now, but also he was always known as that rugby player, and he's not that anymore. So good to hear him talk so honestly, very raw and emotional, but good to hear that the rugby community's around him as well.
Absolutely, we wish him all the very best. Well, we're going to take a bit of a breather. After that, we're going to be talking about what's happening in and around the Gallagher Premiership and beyond. Do let us know what your thoughts are. Remember, contact us, #GP Tonight. We'll speak to you in just a few moments' time. Welcome back to Gallagher Premiership Tonight. We're going to focus for the time being on the #IamEnough situation, which reached prominence when Canterbury released pictures of the new Ireland national kits. Now, they released photographs of international men's players wearing the shirts, but models wearing the ladies' shirts. This obviously caused a good deal of distress and anger amongst certain players. Canterbury have since apologised for the move and released the following statement. I won't expect you to read through all of that. Let's just focus on this. It was always and remains our intention to photograph the female players in the new jersey, and we remain committed to supporting the talented women in our rugby community on and off the field. While the image was primarily designed for our website, which also features male models, it has understandably caused some frustration. We accept that this was an error and apologise for any upset caused. Now, I was chatting with Emily Scarrett yesterday at the Gloucester-Leicester game, and I asked her about this very situation. Emily, why do you think I'm Enough has caused such a stir and created such feeling amongst players and teams, and what stigmas still need to be addressed within the women's game?
Yeah, I think it's been really powerful, hasn't it? I think we've seen players from all over engaging with it, ex-players, current internationals, right through the grassroots level. And I think for me, it's just about saying we've had enough. We've had enough of people judging and criticising us for playing a sport just because we're female. Criticising and judging us because of the way we look and because of our athletic physique and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's the bit that kind of hits home with me is being judged for how you look and having muscles. Well, that's the thing that I've worked really hard for. That's a product and something tangible that I can show for how hard that I've worked to try and be the best that I can be. So I think, we're obviously taking steps forward, we always are, but I think, when you look at positive role models out there, there's so many in the women's game, and I think, they embody all the characteristics that you'll want young children to aspire to be.
We hear this phrase, role models. When you were a young girl growing up playing sport, how important were role models to you?
Yeah, they were huge, but if I'm honest, I didn't have any in rugby. Rugby has always been my thing, but there weren't kind of visible people that I could look up to. So it was people like Kelly Holmes in athletics and things like that. So I think it's really important to have role models, whether they're male or they're female, and across a breadth of sports. And that's what we're trying to do, really. That's what we're pushing for.
Ben, that's the World Player of the Year for 2019. When she speaks, people should listen. Interesting to say it's not I am enough. We've had enough. This is more soul-searching for rugby, isn't it?
I actually think this is great. Not what's happened, obviously, but I think this is a seminal moment now. The uproar that's been caused has gone right across the game, and as a result, this sort of thing won't happen again. You can imagine that anyone in that sort of position within a brand will be saying, crikey, we have learned from our mistakes, let's not do that again. It's the worst possible publicity. So in that respect, it's a good thing. I sympathise a little bit with Canterbury, obviously, with COVID-19. I work in advertising aside from this as well, and I know how difficult the production is, so there's probably been a few challenges around that as well, but we now know that rugby's not going to accept that, and Canterbury would have been the people that make the decisions would have been tasked with selling as many jerseys as possible. That's their key indicator of whether they're doing well or not. some of the other campaigns that have seen women in their rightful place, Saracens released their new kit this week and had the women's players in alongside them. But that's a message that's been led by Saracens, and I think that's what the Irish Rugby Union need to do. The English, the RFU, all the unions need to say, look, we're pushing the women's game. It has to be on an equal footing so that the young Emily Scarretts now have heroes that they can go out and say, that's who I want to be like.
Ugo, this is an opportunity for people to realise how much uproar can be caused by something which seems so insignificant, but it's clearly not.
Yeah, it's really important, like Ben's already said, just to turn those... I mean, I think people talk about women not having a big enough profile. Well, there was an opportunity where they could have used Irish female rugby players to create that profile, to turn them into heroes that people look up to. In fact, one of those models was a friend of mine, and I rang her this morning and said, how have you found it? And she felt slightly uncomfortable because she's someone who's a massive advocate for women's sport. She's been part of RFU campaigns, Inner Warrior campaigns. She wants to see women's sport propelled to the heights which it can go to. So some of the feedback she's had has been slightly upsetting. I think it's interesting because in the men's game, we often have the same discussion. I know when the RFU launch a New England home jersey, they'll use the likes of your Owen Farrells and your Mara Tojas, but they'll also go out and use models because it's deemed that your average person doesn't look like an Owen Farrell or Mara Toja, so they use a model. Either way, the mistake that was made is given a brilliant opportunity to propel these women, to give them faces, to give them platforms to really speak to the next generation, because it's great to see Emily Scarrett as the best player in the world, but we want her and her position and her authority to inspire the next Emily Scarrett, the next Natasha Hunt, the next Katie Daly-McLean. That's what it's all about. It's empowering women to know that they're on the level playing field, and if not, go higher. Because you look at the England women team, for example, they've had far greater success in the last decade than the men's have. So give them that platform to go out and inspire other women to let them know that they can be exactly that.
Absolutely, having the platform is the important thing. Important aspect today, in today's game that we enjoyed, the Bath against Wasps. Sarah Cox, the first female official in a Premiership team running the line for the game that we saw today. These are important strides forward, Ben.
Yeah, they are. Not only does she merit being there, and we saw a couple of interventions today. Joy Neville's another one that's going great guns. We've seen the first Super Rugby actual referee down in Australia over the last couple of weeks. But it does an enormous amount for bringing some of the attitudes of people that are a little bit reticent to say actually they do deserve to be here. They are making a positive impact on the game, and the more, look, rugby needs the women's section of the sport. The more we can grow that, the more it becomes, we always pride ourselves on being a family sport and one where, a social sport where we all get together. We need it to be both sexes and seen on an equal footing, and we're heading that way. It'll take a while. It's not going to happen overnight, but every positive step is one in the right direction.
I totally agree with you, Ben. I'd love it if in 5 years that we have a female ref, we've got assistant referees, people in positions like we have with men, and it's actually just not a story, it's just a part of who we are. And the more conversations we can have about this, the more we can actually highlight it, the more it normalises it, because you're right, there are a certain group of people, men and women, where the optics of what the game looks like and how it should be officiated and how it should be run is fairly archaic. We're in 2020 now, and it needs to represent the times that we're certainly living in.
Absolutely. We look forward to the time where we don't have to talk about it. Absolutely, as you say. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have been coming in over all subjects of the game.
You're slagging me off, Gordon.
Sorry, no, actually, I'm looking through here. Nothing we can say. So this is from Deb Jace. More of a question. How can Eddie Jones not be considering double curry for the England squad? I mean, it's just
He's out to help out. Double curry at the moment.
There's so much good quality out there. I mean, we had the discussion up in commentary.
Curries or players?
Yeah, curries. But it is. It's how do you fit them into the balance of it, and you know, you got to fit Billy Vunipola in there as well. You need your big ball carriers. You need a mix of different skill sets. So Underhill and Curry did so much right together in the World Cup that they deserve to hold on to their place, but there's a lot of other people that will be on the edge of that squad, just coming into that squad that will be itching to get their opportunity.
Jack Willis has to get a go.
Yeah.
Has to.
Sorry?
Jack Willis.
Jack Willis, yeah.
But he's a game changer in everything he does, whether it's ball in hand, whether it's defending, in the line-out, he can do absolutely everything.
He won't pick it.
Sorry, no, you shouldn't.
Don Armand is at home watching this game. Don't say that. This is what happened to me. So one from Gareth Jones. Who do we think will make it to the playoffs? Are the top four in place now, Hugo?
I think Exeter will make it to the playoffs.
You're good.
I think.
That's why we pay you the big
Yes, exactly that. Who will they be with? Bristol Bears, I think. Although they slipped up at the weekend, they'll certainly bounce back. Is the top four, as it stands, is that going to be the top four come round 22? I think we've got a few more twists and turns to come.
Okay.
Good avoidance. Yes. How to answer a question about.
Neither of you need to answer this, but just in case Will Hurrell is still watching, this is from Roddy Jenkins. He's a Bristol fan. Sorry to hear Will's forced retirement. Fully understand the reasons. Hopefully he has a great future ahead of him. So I'm sure lots of Bristol Bears fans are giving you all the very best. Will, what about wingers, Ben? You're clearly the man to talk to about wingers for England. We saw Rory McConaughey today. There is an abundance of riches almost through every single position, isn't there?
Well, obviously the other person is Jack Noel, who had a injury-hampered World Cup campaign, didn't quite get to the level he would have wanted to. Gets a hat-trick yesterday, scored a fantastic try. It's an embarrassment of riches for Eddie Jones, and I'm glad I'm not the one having to pick him.
And you now need to change your mind and start looking ahead to European rugby, because that is what you're going to be discussing on rugby tonight. You and Craig will be chatting about what the new plans are for European competition in the new season. That is at 8 o'clock on Wednesday. And of course, we've got 3 big games coming your way, starting around